Hello, Daisy.
Hello, Shira. How are you
How
today?
I am really well. How are you?
Great, thank you so much. From lovely Las Vegas.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are you going to go hit the tables, win all the
Um,
money?
I have visitors from out of town, so I am going to visit with them. So this
Okay.
evening,
All right. So if I don't hear from you tomorrow, that's it. You won it all.
I've been partying. There's a convention going on, so I'm gonna be lost in the shuffle.
There's always conventions in Las Vegas. I don't think there's ever not a convention in Las Vegas, quite frankly. Amazing, amazing. Well, I am so excited that we're back. This week went so fast, and it was so
It
much
did,
fun.
and
Yeah.
we're at episode 4. Can you believe that?
Yay. Oh, that's exciting. That's so exciting. Well, what are we talking about today, Daisy?
So today we're talking about workforce strategy. Really think about it as AI tsunami. Do you surf or do you drown? Right?
Huh. Right.
So your most companies have workforce plan and assuming gradual change. Then
Okay.
AI kind of delivered a tsunami, which means that about 85% of organizations aren't doing any strategic workforce planning at all. Then AI came. So from the outside, companies are really delivering a message that AI augmented workers are not going to replace jobs, are going to create opportunities. But the reality that's playing out publicly is that it's telling a different story.
Yeah.
What AI is actually saying about the workforce planning doesn't match what companies are embedding in their strategies. Make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. I mean, from the inside, I see this gap every single day, right? Organizations embedded annual planning cycles, static job descriptions, workforce strategies were built on incremental change. But what was embodied? And guess what? Skills are expiring in 2 years instead of 10. We're moving so quickly, and jobs are not keeping up. And AI is doing the work that humans did yesterday, but that friction is enormous because the planning can't keep up with reality. So why now? Because AI isn't waiting for you to catch up, right? The planning can't catch up.
Mhm.
So organizations that figure this out, this continuous workforce intelligence, I think they're going to ride the wave if we stick with that metaphor. And the
Mhm.
ones that don't are going to get hit by it.
Very true. And with AI, amplifying a lot of your skills for those that actually embrace it or embody it,
Right.
we're going to see a decline in some of those skills. Number one, or um, they're totally going to do a career change, right, as they discover AI and what its capabilities are. So I'm
Sure.
super excited.
I am too. I am too. Well, I am going to let you introduce our special guest today because he's a friend of mine for a long, long time. And it could be better coming from you to introduce him, maybe.
So Marcus and Shira goes way back in their Info days on the HCM team, correct?
Yeah, we
Where
were.
years really in the trenches helping organizations kind of navigate massive transformations. So Shira has told me how much she always appreciates Marcus. Listen, Marcus doesn't just understand HR systems or workforce strategy in theory. He understands the messy reality of what actually happens in organizations and when you try to execute things inside real organizations and real constraints. So today, Shira, I'll let you introduce Marcus and what he's done in the past. So today, as a chief strategy officer at, do you say it as one word, Marcus? So please correct me.
Lytiqs.
Linux. Okay, Linux. Marcus is focused on something that becomes urgent for every organization. How do you plan your workforce when AI is fundamentally changing what works? Like, who does it? How fast is everything moving? He's genuinely passionate about elevating the human experience at work and perspective shapes everything he does. Marcus brings decades of experience across HR strategy, marketing, product management, and sales, which gives him his rare ability to see the whole picture, not just one piece. Today, we're talking about workforce planning and about workforce, the AI tsunami, basically. And there's nobody better to have that in this conversation. Marcus, welcome to the Glass House.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Hello,
Yeah.
my friend.
Hello.
It's so good to have you. Thank you. Did we introduce you correctly?
Well done. Well
Was that
done.
enough?
Although the audience should definitely lower their expectations. That was too much.
Oh, raise them, raise them. I will say this though, is before we get into all of it, because I don't want to forget, is that you have the most amazing newsletter on LinkedIn. And I want you to make sure you mention it and create really thought leadership videos and messaging and stuff. And if people aren't following you, please do, because we'll put it up at the end. But I want to make sure that they know about that too, because
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
nice
good
of you.
stuff.
I
I love it.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course. I love when I get it. Yeah. Yeah, we did work together years ago. Blah, 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 years ago. And we had a lot of fun for many, many, many years watching all the craziness. But I have a question for you. Okay. What is fundamentally different about workforce planning, right? And you and I, when we've talked in the past, we knew it as workforce management, right?
Right.
Time and attendance, scheduling, that kind of stuff was what we were involved in then. And really, when I was there, when I left it in for 6 years ago, I guess, it was the beginning of what we were seeing from this perspective, right? About true strategic planning, but I wasn't involved in any of that. But I think even just in the last 2 years, what are you seeing that's so fundamentally different, and where are we going and what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer, Daisy already hit on, it's 2 letters, AI. But before we go there, let's actually start by putting some definition around this space. Because when I talk to people about workforce planning or strategic workforce planning, I get blank stares a lot. Like, what exactly are you talking about? I actually had a call recently with an analyst, and they didn't even have a category for workforce planning. They were like, oh, are we talking about workforce management? So let's start there, because workforce management tends to be where people sometimes lump this category of need. Workforce management is much more now. So we need to schedule people and make sure that we've got coverage. We need to track their time and attendance. And there's a small amount of labor forecasting that happens for the next couple of weeks, right? That's workforce management, okay? And then workforce planning is pushing that out a little bit further. Generally speaking, folks would probably assume that that's an annual budgeting and planning process, headcount oriented, right? And strategic workforce planning is much more future oriented. Where are we going to be in 2027, 2028? Do we have the workforce, and within that workforce, the skills and abilities to meet those objectives in the future or not? And how do we plan accordingly? That is an oversimplification, but I think it's important that we start in a simplified way. Yeah. So coming back to your original question, Shara, the thing that's changed in the last few years is AI. And it's changed in 2 ways. First of all, when you think about where your workforce is going to be in 2027, you have to acknowledge the fact that a large portion of your workforce will have been automated or augmented in some way, shape, or form by bots, by agents, by some form of technology. And so you have to account for that in your strategic workforce plan. The other way that AI is changing it is you actually should be using AI in the strategic workforce planning process, using machine learning to aggregate all of the data, using it to actually help generate insights about the data that you're collecting so that you know what to do with it. I'll use a really simple example. All of us probably use ChatGPT at this point, right? So I never write anything starting with a blank piece of paper. I go into ChatGPT and I throw in a bunch of prompts, and then I go from there. And the same thing's happening in strategic workforce planning, where there's an acknowledgement and an opportunity to understand what's the AI exposure rate of particular roles. How do we factor that into the plan? So anyway, I could go on, but the short answer again is AI.
Good. You're good.
Yeah, very true. I remember being in the healthcare space and dealing with contract workers. So meaning that we are the MSP provider, so we have to do a lot of workforce planning with the organization based on, the flu season, not just that, but back then there was all the EMR projects where everything had to be, electronic medical records need to be, it was a project that every hospital needed to do. The planning of the boomers leaving. So the planning, we used to call it, we sold it as predictive analytics, right? That's what we used to call it. So now with AI, that makes it more accessible for organizations to look at that. And So good point. A lot of things are changing. For sure.
Yeah, and Daisy, healthcare in particular is going to be fascinating over the next decade. I think, what's the average age of a nurse in the US? It's like high 40s, I think. So you're seeing high burnout, lots of folks kind of on the cusp of retirement, labor shortages that were already existed. And we also know that healthcare is transitioning from a volume fee-based service to more value-based, keeping people healthy. And so the financial models are changing. They're getting out of acute care into ambulatory and virtual care. That's a totally different skill set. So, I mean, you can see how you need to have strategic workforce planning tools and resources in order to plan for the future. This used to be kind of an extra thing. You said at the beginning, Daisy, 85% of organizations, according to Gartner, don't even do it. That's got to change in the future. It's going to become a prerequisite.
Yeah.
How though? So, we think about whether it's workforce planning or workforce management, we look at who are the people in the organization first, and then we look outside, right? So from the inside, we're saying, who are our employees? Who are our resources? What do we have available to us? What do they offer, right? And then we can make those decisions as to what we're going to do. I come from the HCM side of things, right? The human capital part of it. And I say to myself, if organizations are not carefully understanding who their people are, what their capabilities are, training them effectively, certifying them in the areas that they need to be certified, doing all the things to ensure that they have the right data to do that planning first, right? You can't do any of that. If you don't know who you have and you can't validate it and you can't be sure, especially in something like that's as critical as healthcare, right? How are you going to be really strategic in your planning if you don't really know? And I'll take a step back for a second. I remember when I was selling HCM software and I would sit down and do these big discoveries. You've heard me say this, Marcus. And I would say, what are you trying to do? And they go, we need succession planning. And I'd say, you need succession planning? You're on spreadsheets. You're doing Post-it notes. What do you mean? And then I'd say, great. Okay. Do you have all of the criteria that we need to start building succession plans? Do you know what good looks like? Do you know? They're like, no. But we need succession planning. I think it's kind of the same, right? Like, what are people saying about knowing what their workforce is? And then where does the external part of it come from?
Yeah, it's got to be data driven. And I should have said at the beginning, for those folks that don't know me, I'm a recovering HR practitioner, right? So I spent time as a practitioner, and I know historically HR has not been incredibly data driven. You see on the finance side, you've got GAAP, right? Generally accepted accounting principles. There's a lot of structure and rigor to finance.
Yeah.
We need to do the same thing in HR. And part of that too, and when you talk about collecting data, Shara, about the workforce, it's got to be accurate data. And how much of it today is self-reported? Think about when I come to an employer and I'm like, hey, here's my resume. This is all the stuff I say I can do. So we're working with partners right now under common ownership where we're actually using AI simulations to evaluate whether or not you can actually do this job. I don't care what you say. You can show me, can you do it or not? So what happens then is the credibility and the veracity of the data is elevated. And that way, when you're doing workforce planning or anything with that data, it's going to be better. So
it's another level of AI that's being brought into to understand who your workforce is. I've always had an issue of the subjectivity of HR, right? Yeah. It's humans evaluating other humans, telling their stories, deciding who's good and who's not, and the politics of all of that. And that creates a difficult scenario when we're looking at things like performance metrics and that kind of stuff when we look at succession or other areas. So I hope that we can find a better way of doing that, right? There's got to be another way that we can truly measure objectively so that we're getting the right information to be able to decide who can do what. Yeah, the good news is we have more data than we've ever had before about our people. The question is, how do we aggregate that data in a meaningful way that we can then understand what is the data telling us we should do about the situation that we're in? So that's kind of the next step. The first part is collecting all of the siloed data and all of these different ERP and HCM and WFM systems, bringing it together and then evaluating what does it tell us and then acting on it. And that's the hardest part, isn't it? So can you do, and I may be jumping ahead here, but so I'm sitting down and I'm deciding, what is my business going to be in the next 3 years, the next 5 years? What am I going to do? And where am I going to get the resources to do it? Because I say this all the time. I know that everyone says AI is replacing everything, but there still is not a company that doesn't have humans, right? And so I'm confident that the humans will prevail, and we will, I think we'll be doing things differently. I think that there will be lots of exciting opportunities for humans that we never thought about, right? I mean, it's an incredible thing to watch. Every single industrial revolution, every change that's happened, big and small, create other opportunities that we didn't know we needed, or we didn't know we could do, right? So I tend to be an optimist, so I'm going to go with that. And of course, I forgot my question now. But what is it? I can't help myself. But if I'm sitting down as an executive and I'm saying, okay, I want to plan my organization for the next 3 to 5 years. What is that going to look like from a workforce strategy perspective? What is this kind of workforce planning doing other than that, right? That seems not transactional, but it's okay. I say to the tool, I want to open 17 more stores or 33 more hotels or whatever that is. What does the dialogue look like in terms of using these tools and how they help them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think what's also different than what we used to do is we used to do these kinds of things simply by looking at headcount.
Sure.
How many people do we need to open these 17 stores, Shara?
Right.
And that was a simple, relatively straightforward question. But again, if we evaluate this in the lens of AI, of knowing that in 2026 and 2027 and 2028, there's going to be so much more automation and augmentation of those individual roles based on the individual tasks associated with the work that needs to be done, then that's not a straightforward question anymore, because I don't need, 100 people per store anymore, because we've automated a lot of what they do. So I might need 60, I might need 50. And those people I do need may need a completely different skill set than the ones that we used to hire. So that changes a lot. The other thing that I'm seeing too is this acknowledgement that, again, we talked about finance having a lot of structure and rigor and budgeting and planning and gap and all that. I think HR and finance really need to start collaborating more on these topics. And you know what? I'll add a third party to that conversation, and that's IT. Like, I don't know if you've seen, Shara, I was reading about Moderna, a very large organization that has said, you know what we're going to do? We're combining our HR and IT functions. And they're like, hey, you know what? I don't care how the work gets done. If a bot or an agent does the work or a human being, work needs to get done. HR, IT, work together to figure this out, which kind of makes sense if you think about a lot of work being automated. So now we've got finance saying, hey, we need to figure out how do we, be profitable and productive. And you've got HR with our people hat on going, hey, what can we do to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward for our people? And also making sure that we're utilizing these people in the best way possible and helping them reach their full potential. I love that.
Right.
And then the IT folks are like, well, hey, I can do a lot of this stuff for you, so you don't have to do this administrative, transactional, manual stuff. So those three groups that historically have operated in silos and maybe familiar with each other, but don't collaborate, that's got to change.
That's so interesting.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead, Daisy.
With the IT side with HR, I'm trying to wrap my head around that right now.
Me too. What is the intent there, that IT is going to assume responsibility of the more administrative work from
think about it just from an HR perspective. So I have these conversations with like CHROs, and it's funny because the more tenured CHROs, we'll put it that way, the ones that have been doing their job for quite some time, they fight this stuff. When I say, hey, listen, all you need is this new kind of like case management tool, and all of your people in your organization can pull out their phone and ask any question they want related to their career, and they'll get an immediate answer through agentic AI and chatbots. And they're like, I don't like that. HR is supposed to be personable and available and high touch. And I'm like, yes to all of those things. However, the next generation, first of all, doesn't want to talk to a human being a lot of times. They'd much rather pull out their phone and get simple answers to like, what's my PTO balance? And do we, how many, days off do I get this year? And things like that. So what we have to recognize then is if we're going to engage IT, then they can help us figure out which administrative tasks can be handed to bots. And IBM talked about this, Shara, at the HR Tech event last fall. The CHRO from IBM talked about them pushing all of their HR related questions and requests through their new chat functionality. And that new chat capability, that new AI capability fields the majority of IBM's workforce's questions and requests now. But the point that I make to those CHROs is now this frees up your HR partners to do completely different things. They're now available, right?
No, very good point. Very good point. Task-oriented admin stuff needs technology in these days. It's handy. You can, especially if you are in the acuity space of healthcare, they work 12-hour shifts. HR is not going to be available 24/7 for them to answer these questions. As a matter of fact, their hours are so short that even people coming in for a 3 p.m. shift are not able to go into HR because they're shut down by 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock because they start at 6 in the morning, right? Totally. And so I think this is where you were going, is that the human touch they need to be heard and seen when they need to want to talk to somebody. And that's where the disconnect is, where HR thinks that if we give them automation, everything's going to solve the problem. And even HR don't have to face the employees. But that's not the case. They want them to also be accessible in a way when they need to be heard at that moment. So how are they going to augment that?
That's exactly right. And Daisy, I like your use of healthcare as an example. For those folks that are in the world of healthcare, you recognize that today healthcare kind of has a foot in both boats of still getting paid for fee for service. So I get sick, I go into a doctor, I get paid. But they're about halfway transition to what we call value-based care, which is actually getting paid to keep a population healthy. And so it makes me think of the healthcare workforce. Over here, we're waiting for nurses to burn out and to quit and to, we've got a problem there. Or we can proactively look for ways to keep them healthy. Well, that's hard for HR to do if they're constantly addressing these, compliance related administrative stuff. But you take that off their plate, now they can spend time doing that. In fact, you know what I think? I think the very role of a supervisor and a manager is going to change because of AI. So think about what the basic elements of management are. It's making sure, Shara, that you're compliant with, did you clock in and out appropriately? Are you compliant with your shift? Did you take this training and education? We can have technology literally track and communicate all of that. So as your manager, I never have to worry about that again. And that means I can focus on actually cultivating an authentic relationship with you, better understanding what your skills and superpowers are, so I can align you with the work that's available in the organization. So I see this changing so much, not just the HR discipline, but the general discipline of management.
Listen, I have preached this for decades, right? What is the difference between a manager, supervisor, or a leader, right? And how do we pivot in successful organizations? How do we pivot those people from managing and supervising to truly leading, for exactly the reason you just said, right? In any real professional environment, and I'll share something that happened to me. I was looking to make a change in a company, and my new potential boss wanted to speak with someone I'd worked with before, and I gave him a name, and he spoke with this person, and he hired me to do the job. And about a month in, we got to know each other well, and we were sitting and having drinks after work one day, and he said, I got to share something with you. He said, the person that you gave me to talk said, when I spoke to this person, I said, tell me about Shara. And she said, oh, Shara is very difficult to manage.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I don't need to be managed. I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I need to be led. I need someone who's going to inspire me. I've done this. I've done my job, right? There's no issue there. And I'll never forget that, because it really speaks to the lack of understanding of what real leadership is, right? Which is a whole other conversation, and I'm not going to go down that path. I do want to say though, Mark, because it's really funny. Were you in the room with me about 10 years ago when we met with IBM to bring Watson into Coleman?
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know if
yeah.
I was in the
Yes,
room for that
sorry.
conversation, but you're right. IBM's Watson was one
Yeah.
of the first, and that's actually what the CHRO at IBM was talking about. Was
Yes.
they embraced this with Watson, but what they didn't have 10 years ago was the generative AI component
Correct.
of it,
Right.
and the agentic element too, to not only listen to your question or request, but then to actually act on it and never involve a human being. But yes, it's funny. IBM was ahead of the game, weren't they?
Well, we had those conversations. We were going to partner with them to try to make this happen. We sat there and had the conversations around the what ifs. Infor had a case management system, was trying to be as forward thinking as possible. Great CEO at the time that always thought 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
And Charles brought them into the room, and I was so fortunate to be there. And I thought, this is crazy. This is never going to happen. This is insane. This is never going to work. And that partnership didn't work, but they were talking about it then. So it was really funny because someone said to me a couple months ago, you've been in AI for over 10 years. I said, no, I haven't. We called it, I don't know what we called it back then, but that wasn't it, right? It was the beginning of all of this, data management and giving information and doing those things, because you're right. Who wants to be responsible for managing time, right? For doing all those things that don't truly bring value to an organization. Yeah. If people can have more time to be inspired, to be strategic, to think about new things, to develop, rather than creating spreadsheets and PowerPoints and all this other stuff, imagine what organizations can do. It's incredible.
Yep.
You know, Daisy, were you gonna?
No, I'm agreeing to everything you're saying, because in the back of my head, I was thinking about there's also this compliance pieces right. as well. Because we were talking about healthcare, that's also preventing like HR or anything to move forward faster. Not just compliance within the own organization or healthcare systems, but state state compliance. Sure. For credentials, your TB shots, all that type of stuff. And there's obviously a lot of controversy around the shots that are being given now, or what should people have in their body. So everything then becomes a political piece. And so there's another layer in the healthcare space that's being affected by how organizations operate. So anyway, that's just one other thing.
Oh, no, I think it's so true, Marcus. In your platforms, we talked about what's inside now, right? The employees that sit inside an organization and being able to look at that data and understand and create models and do all this planning. What do they do about the outside? What do they do about candidates? What access in this new world do we have to what's out there? Does that play a part in this?
It does. It's a simple supply and demand question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, to your point, you look inside the organization, mm-hmm. and instead of pigeonholing people of, oh, well, I've got these people that can only do this one role, you mm-hmm. break them down by the different skills, abilities, and the tasks that they're focused on today, and figure out how many of those are transferable, where I could use them over here too, before we do anything like layoffs. But then when you look externally too, because it's got to be part of your planning process, mm-hmm. then you got to understand, well, especially when it comes to specialized roles, those pink squirrels that are hard to find, how many of them are out there in the wild? You've got to be able to understand that. And so you got to be able to use data to understand, okay, if we know, for example, there's not a ton of nurses out there waiting to be picked up. Part of that's because there's not enough nurse educators. Part of it's because there's such high turnover in that first year of nursing. There's a lot of reasons for it. But bottom line is, you're right. You've got to be able to have good data inside your organization, but also externally. And then you combine it. And that helps you to decide, you've got 4 B's, right? To act on. You can build that talent internally. You can buy that talent externally. You can borrow that talent from contingent staffing and third parties and contractors, or you can bot that talent, meaning let's just automate it, right? Those are the 4 B's that you have to choose from. But you got to have data about all of the different elements, including what's happening outside.
That's so interesting. No, go ahead, Daisy.
No, I'm agreeing. Very true.
So are these tools making decisions or making suggestions around is it kind of chicken and the egg, right? Is it saying this is what you have, this is what's out there, therefore this is what you need to push to technology or do something differently? Or are we now able to kind of look at a scenario, and I'm guessing that all of this information is pumped into these scenarios, and say, great, based on all of this, here's the suggestion as to how to move forward. What does that look like when we're doing workforce planning at this level today?
Yeah, we're in the infancy of starting to automate the generation of strategic workforce plans, where you plug in all of your data and it pops up kind of your current situation, and then you basically enter in where you want to be in the next few years. And then you can run a lot of different scenarios and models, but there are some recommendations that come out of that of, well, if you automate 7% of this particular role, and you maybe let this role increase the attrition rate and let some of those folks go, but increasing the hiring over here, and knowing that there's a different expense ratio for those different roles. So basically, you combine all of these different elements to get to where you want to be. We're starting to see the ability for you to not have to come up with that stuff again with a blank piece of paper, but rather a head start with insights from the data. So early days on that, Shara, but that's where we're headed, is being able to understand, again, like looking in your organization saying, what's the AI exposure rate for this role versus that one? And how do we plan accordingly?
So it's potential for modeling, right? I can look at scenarios and say, here's what I might want to do. If I own hotels, for example, we'll do a little monopoly. I own hotels and I want to open 10 more. So if I said, and this is such a crazy what if, but if let's say I was going to open a bunch of hotels and I put in this scenario, I could automate the check-in process. Right. So a person comes in, because we were talking about travel before we started our old travel days. People can walk up and they can check themselves in, and we don't even have to have people there at the front desk. Now, me personally, because I'm old, I want to see a person when I walk in, because I want to ask them for stuff and upgrade and, do the thing. But does it does it do that kind of thing? Like, oh, here's the scenario where you can not have anybody there and everyone can just walk in and put in their credit card. Is that the kind of thing that it's doing?
Absolutely. And that's a great example too, because we've all, recognized that now you can pull out your mobile device and get your key card on your phone and walk right up to your room, and you never talk to anybody. And I think the next generation is totally fine with that. Some of us, prefer a human being to interact with, at least initially, but I won't put us in the old category, but again, we're more tenured. But yes, the idea is just that, right? To say, okay, what if we automated 75% of that process, but we still have we need about 25% of a human to doing some of that work. Well, then what is that human going to spend the other 75% of their time doing? That's when you got to figure, okay, well, what else do we need? And what other transferable skills do they have that are adjacent to that kind of role? And this is where we start to have to recognize that there are social consequences to all of these technology shifts. Yes. And we have to start thinking differently about, like, 2024 Deloitte Human Capital Trends Report talked about the end of jobs. And they didn't mean we're all losing our jobs. What they meant was maybe hiring somebody for a job is no longer the right social construct. I need to hire you, Shara, for, again, your transferable skills. All work is becoming temporary and project-based. So I don't know if I should bring you into this organization with a title and a job versus I'm going to ask you to do a wide variety of things. Right. And what are the implications of that? My goodness. But it comes back to what I said at the beginning. You can't do headcount planning anymore. That doesn't work.
Right. I love the idea of what I know it to be is roles, responsibilities, and expectations, right? And what does an organization look like in terms of that dynamic? Because again, it flips it around, right? And it flips it around to say, I don't care that your role is manager 2 of this, right? If you have capability to do other things, and I can see a path for growth and for the organization, I want to take advantage of that. I mean,
Mm.
I've done this knowingly and unknowingly my entire career when I hire people based on a gut feeling that this person could do something really spectacular.
Yeah.
We can, because the bots, the AI, the technology can do those specific things,
Mhm.
right? I think that's really fascinating. Wow. Okay. It's kind of mind blowing though to think about
Mhm.
where we're going and what we're doing. We do a little fun thing here on the show. We call it the outside view in, right? Where we look at real life. You mentioned a couple of them, but we're going to this Moderna thing, which is unbelievable. I got to look that up.
Yeah.
But we look at, what is a real life story that kind of fits into the understanding of how we see things. What are we doing? The mistakes that are being made. In the past, we've looked at people that post stuff online about companies and the dialogue that's out there and how we can find anything about anybody, anytime, any company. Glassdoor has been around for a long time and the impact that has. And you talk about the impact. So I got one for you that I found. Just want to get your take on this. Just happened a few months ago. And I'll show a little thing up here. I always pronounce his name wrong. Is it Benioff? Mark Benioff?
I think it's Benioff.
Of Salesforce, the CEO of Salesforce. Okay. And let me just put that on there so it stays. There are not going to be mass layoffs. We're not going to do anything. We are, not going to be, we're going to invest in technology. Obviously Salesforce is a technology company, but we are going to take care of our people. I think it was a month later, they reduced their customer support team from 9,000 to 4,000. They let off 5,000 people, just like that.
Yeah.
I remember it. I remember, as I have a lot of people friends that work at Salesforce and are in Salesforce adjacent roles with system integrators and stuff like that. And he blamed AI. Yeah. He said, I can bot these out. Maybe that's the term we're going to use now. I'm going to bot these jobs out. And guess what? I don't think it's working. I don't think there's great success in any of that, right? Was that a strategic move on his behalf? Was it true? We don't know. We'll never know. I tried to find a statistic as to whether or not how many of those have been rehired, but that's a big one, right? That's a huge company and a big shift.
Yeah.
So I'd love your take on that.
Yeah. So I think I wrote a newsletter on that toward the end of the year, because at the end of the year is when we start to see a bit of an uptick in layoffs, which is great to lay off a bunch of people right before the holidays.
Beautiful.
So I still am amazed that organizations do that, but it's so short-sighted. And the other thing, Shara, to your point, is they're using AI as the excuse. They're like, hey, we're letting all these people go because we automated their roles. And you know what? In most cases, that's crap. That's just an excuse. It is not why they're doing it. For the most part, they're doing it because they overhired during the pandemic. Okay. So we saw this huge upswing. They hired way too many people because our business was going like up and to the right. And then things calmed down into kind of back into a relatively normal state. And they're like, geez, we have way too many of these people. Let's blame it on AI and let these folks go. But what's short-sighted about all of this is them letting go, 4,000 or 5,000 people. I'm not sure what it said. I guarantee you in a short period of time, they're going to be like, man, we need some of these people back. We don't need them in the same department they were in, but we need them over here. And they don't recognize the institutional knowledge and the intellectual capital that those people possess when they walk them to the door and say, thank you for your 10 years here. Right. And then realize a year or two later, man, that was dumb. We need those folks back. And again, this is where if you actually plan ahead, then you can see, okay, before we make any big decisions, and layoffs sometimes are necessary, but I think they're wielded as this, blunt instrument versus the surgical precision of a really good strategic workforce plan.
So we know that a replacement of a human can cost up to 4 times their salary, right? Depending on the role. You talk about a cost, right? You talk about justifying that kind of expense when you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of people. And now you realize, wait a second, I made a really big mistake. Or to your point, I need them somewhere else. But that that what you said about intellectual property, what that person knows about that organization, about how things work. I mean, how long does it take when we join new companies? And you just joined yours recently, right? How long does it take just to feel comfortable to know anything, right? It's anywhere from 3 to 6 months. The statistics say that an employee feels grounded, right? Ready to really start producing and delivering back to an organization. It's so foolish to me that this is the conversation we're having around AI, that we're just going to blame AI, right? We're not going to blame bad management. We're not going to blame bad planning. We're not going to, right? We're not going to say we didn't know what we were doing. It kills me. It absolutely kills me. And we've seen it over and over and over again.
And some organizations don't see that there's monetary value in their, getting, like you said, 6 months before they get grounded and get going again. So that means 6 months of unproductivity or lost sales, right? Compared to if you had just thought about your workforce planning and look at, again, the skill sets that these people have. Again, it's coming from how did you really know these people that you let go? Number one, probably not, right? Is the answer. And if you had known them, you would have planned differently, and you would still be operating and probably get them to speed in about a month versus 6 months if you rehired them or brought new people. So
and you know what? Part of these decisions too, we haven't talked about this, but I want to acknowledge it. Some of them are purely financial, right? Like, hey, we want to, cut costs. And the easiest way to do that, what's the largest expense in most organizations is people. Let's just, cut off, 10% and go from there. Maybe our stock price will get a little bump. And so again, very short-sighted versus long-term planning of, well, hold on, we can still cut costs and be more productive and efficient in different ways. It takes a little bit more time and a little bit more intentionality, but you can do it, but that's not easy.
Well, it takes very strategic thinking, right?
Yes.
It takes someone who sees the vision. I was working with a client looking to upgrade their HCM and financial systems. And in the discovery process, we had a lot of conversations around, what are you trying to do? I like to ask what might be a really difficult question, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish here? And let's the door is closed and we're keeping it in here. And what is it that you want to do? Is it about cost cutting for the sake of budget, right? Or do you need to do that? And one of the things that someone said to me was they were running an old system that took about 7 people in IT to manage every single day to do HR payroll. Okay. There are 55, 65,000 employees. So it's a big organization, significant turnover, but 7 or 8 people are running that system. And my proposition was, if you go to a modern system, this was 5 years ago, so it was like, more modern now. But if you go to a modern HR and payroll system, we can theoretically eliminate half of those roles, let's say, maybe more, right? Because they're doing manual IT management of this system day to day.
Right.
And I said, what are these people? What is the average salary of one of these people? To your point, they're very tenured. They're very experienced.
Yeah.
Okay. 6 figures. Middle of America, 6-figure salary. Wow, that's a lot of money. If we could get rid of 5 of those people, you've got $500,000. And I turned to the head of IT who was sitting in the room and I said, how many open IT roles do you have right now that you can't fill? Because they were kind of in the middle of nowhere. And he said, I have about 12 that I can't fill. Can't find the people. I said, they're sitting in payroll.
Yep.
Right? Because so I think that's where, and it's so hard. Like when we're in the muck, so I use this analogy all the time. So for people that have heard it now 16 times, if I were drowning, if I'm out in the middle of the sea and I'm drowning, all I care about is getting to the surface to breathe. I'm not thinking about anything else. I don't care where I am. I just want to be able to breathe and not drown.
Yeah.
If God forbid one of you were drowning and I'm standing on the shore, I'm not only going to make sure that you get up to breathe, but I'm going to have the ambulance there and I'm going to have the doctor there and I'm going to have the machine that you need and I'm going to have the buoy thing to bring you back. I'm going to organize all of that because I'm not drowning. Right? I think the same is true in any situation. when we're in the muck, we can't
Yeah.
see it. What
Yeah.
I see so valuable about what you're offering in terms of this other viewpoint is an opportunity for something even more objective to be able to go, wait a second, look over here, right? You're not seeing what I'm seeing. I'm able to see things in a very different way that could steer you in another direction you weren't even thinking about. Am I off target there, or is that what this is about?
Yep, totally. Love it. And I'll use another analogy too. Again, those of us who are more tenured remember printing out MapQuest instructions and taking them in our rental car when we get into a city and we're like, okay, where do I turn? I mean, kids these days don't know how good they have it, just having these directions. But you know, so what we're talking about is that's the traditional way of, okay, I know I'm going to land at JFK and I got to drive, you know, through these different areas and this is my destination. And so I've got these printed instructions versus today. It knows when there's construction up ahead and there's an accident here and it's telling you, hey, there's some cops over here. And so you go a completely different way. And then halfway there, you realize, actually, I don't need to go there anymore. I need to go over here. And so you pivot and you adapt. That's the world we live in today. And you can't have these printed instructions anymore. It doesn't work because the world changes so fast. You've got to be able to pivot too.
It does.
Here, I just want to address, I think we have a question from one of our, it's now showing on our site. It wasn't earlier, but Laura, she's saying,
sorry, I missed them.
I think we want to address it a little bit. So, unlocking human capital potential and elevating the employee experience. But will those folks who were laid off really want to go back to the organization?
Oh, Laura, that's such a great question. I have my opinions. And by the way, and I didn't say this in the beginning, and I usually always do, we love your questions. So we want everybody to ask lots of questions if they can. I think this is a leadership issue, right? How it's handled, what's done, why are they doing it? That's a tough one. I don't know. Would I go back if someone laid me off? If they did it well, if I didn't feel it was, punitive in any way, or if I was treated well, I would. I think I would. Would you guys?
That's a good question. Of how it's handled is the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really important because we can all appreciate the fact that that economic winds change.
Absolutely.
Geopolitical winds change. Okay, my job may not exist anymore. That's okay. But how you handle it's important. And then the other piece is, what if you got creative instead of saying we're going to lay those folks off and said, who wants to work half-time, right? Who wants to, change the way that, you're coming into the office or not coming into. I think the next generation is much more adaptable than we have ever been. They're like, I will give up a high salary and highfalutin titles for, I want to work the 4-day week, or I want to work 3 days from home, or, I want to work asynchronously, meaning I'm going to work from 10 at night to 4 in the morning because I'm a night owl. What do you care what time I work? As long as I'm getting my stuff done. This is the social consequences that I was talking about, how we're like, well, no, you can't do that because that's outside of the traditional ways of working. I think we need to get a little bit more open to the fact that there's no such thing as a gold watch and working for the same organization for the next 40 years. Let's acknowledge that. Right. And there's no, this is bi-directional too. So it's not like employers are, not treating folks the right way. And it never happens the opposite, where you hear about employees that have 2 or 3 jobs at the same time and the other employers have no idea. So let's just acknowledge, for what it is, that we're all going to get the best we can for ourselves. And I think, again, I would put back to your point, I would go back if it was handled well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And she's saying that the company brand is at stake in the long term. I guess on what you mentioned is how it was handled, right? And I'm going to just make a joke about the gold watch, by the way, Marcus.
Okay.
I had a glass clock not a watch.
Yes.
A gold watch, I would have been able to sell it, but now I have a glass clock that has a gold plate on it that says, "Thank you for your 10 years. Here's a glass clock."
Yeah, it's funny how that's changed too. My wife spent 20 years at the same employer, and they had the same kind of little trinkets. And there was a glass clock. There was I think it was like a kaleidoscope thing that you could look. I mean, just like all of this stuff that, in retrospect, you're like, I'm not sure. Because the next generation's like, oh, what do you get for 10 years here? They're like, I don't care. You think I'm going to be here in 10 years? So what's funny too is that's where you're seeing, again, like there's a lot of great reward and recognition companies out there that help you figure out how do you create programmatic approaches to that. So take all that dumb money that you're putting into 10-year anniversaries and use it to reward and recognize those folks that are demonstrating the behaviors that you want to encourage today. Don't wait 5 years because they won't be there.
Correct.
And what about understanding what they want? What about really being flexible enough to understand that for one person, it doesn't work for another person? There was, during Corona, there was a podcast, and I do not remember what it was. Maybe I can find it. But there was a company that said that they were working from home. We were all, working from home. There wasn't going into an office. And they determined that there were a lot of mothers or caregivers in the organization. It was a small company. And they did something. I have to find this because it was so fascinating to me. They would block, I think, 2 hours a day or something because they were taking care of kids who were in school and at home and all this kind of stuff. And after we went back to work and after everything opened up again, they kept those policies in place where someone can block 2 hours out of their day. And it wasn't like, oh, you took an extra lunch. You can't, And if the person wasn't a parent or a caregiver of any kind, they'd say, look, you can use that time to go to the gym. We don't care where you're doing it and when you're doing it, to your point, if the work is getting done. Now, it doesn't work if you're a waiter in a restaurant. You can't show up at 3 a.m. when nobody's there. It doesn't work if you're a physician and you're not safe. But for so many of our jobs, what possible difference does it make? And I don't understand why employers don't understand that. And we know from the data that we were more productive during Corona than at any other time in history. So, there are 10 different shows we can have on that conversation. The backlash of forcing people to go back to work by giving them bagels and saying, isn't this fantastic? I know as a New Yorker, the cost of commuting, dry cleaning, transit, lunches, all the things that, to your point, I would have made, I haven't been worked in an office in over a decade, but if I had to, I'd be like, no, you can pay me less money if I don't have to do all that stuff.
Absolutely.
If I don't pay $500 a month for a train pass, I think it's crazy. I love this. I think this is so incredible. And we've gone off on about 17 different tangents, as we always do. but I think that, because I think that it all intertwines, right? There's a real fundamental. And what I'm, sitting here stewing in is it's about leadership, good communication, understanding who your people are, paying attention to that. And if the advent of AI and all of these amazing tools can take away the stuff that keeps us from doing those things, imagine what we can do.
Yeah.
We can build relationships.
Do you mind, Shara, if I identify like kind of a bit of a call to action? I know.
Yeah, of course.
I saw on the list of folks that signed up, a lot of HR leaders. And again, those are my people. So message to, the HR discipline out there in terms of a call to action. Number one, in the context of this conversation, we need to give our workforce the time to learn how to leverage AI. It can't be an extra thing that they learn on the weekend or if they can fit it in. You need to bake into the daily workflow time to learn AI. Okay. Number one. Number two, I think, and this may be a little bit controversial, HR has historically been part of the organization that helps to mitigate risk and to avoid litigation. I think we need to abandon that because, again, I think technology is going to do all of that compliance and control stuff. HR needs to start taking risks, okay, in terms of what we're doing for the organization, placing bets that maybe if we do this very differently, we're going to see huge results in terms of productivity and efficiency. And then the last thing I would say is HR needs to be the ones that are encouraging and enabling change. not managing change. Change management is gone. It's about empowering people and expecting them and encouraging them to change. Right. That is a very different mindset than let's do change management. So just a couple of recommendations.
I want to bring you back and we can have that entire conversation because I just launched an entire new methodology called change embodiment.
Ooh, and it is, tell me about that.
Well, we don't have time today because we only have about 4 more minutes. So we're going to do it next time. Okay. I swear to God, we didn't plan this, but it's actually going to get posted on LinkedIn and there's some great stuff on my website, but I think we've been doing it wrong. Change management has been just simply ticking the box and we do not consider the humans at all in the process. Yeah. And if we don't start to look at what we're doing, both from a technological and a non-technological position in our organizations, it's not working. We're not doing it, right? We're embedding these things. They're not embodied in the people and in the culture and in the processes, right? And we've seen it over and over and over again. So I will be talking about this a lot. So you have to come back and we can just talk about this. Marcus, tell us where they can find you, where everyone can connect to you, obviously on LinkedIn. And I encourage everyone who's hearing this, if you're not connected to the three of us, you've got our ways of meeting us on LinkedIn. So we definitely want to hear from you. But where can they find you aside from LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. But like you pointed out, I recently joined Lytiqs, Lytiqs. So be sure to check out our site there too. Again, I'm 2 months in. So to your point, Cher, I'm pretty useless right now, which my coworkers would probably attest to. Okay. And then also workplacehope.com is another site. You mentioned earlier the newsletter. I just love hope. I think it's needed in the world of work. And so I've got some stuff out there too, but would love to collaborate and connect with anybody that's interested.
Let me make sure I'm getting this right. That's it?
That's it.
I love it. Technology is amazing. It's been incredible. I think this conversation is really cool. This conversation, again, I think it's opening us up. The technology's opened up the opportunity to even do this conversation, which is really amazing. And I think that we can really change the way that we work, and we work a lot, right? It's the biggest thing in our lives, right? And why should it be exciting? And so you said something, I'm going to put this up on the screen because it's your line, right? You cannot deliver financial results with a perpetually destabilized workforce.
Yeah.
So 30 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it this whole time. You talked about how interrelated everything we've talked about really is. Mm-hmm. All of those things can contribute to this perpetually destabilized workforce. Mm-hmm. And in healthcare, you're not going to be able to deliver value-based care and good outcomes. In the financial space, you're not going to be able to deliver financial outcomes with your workforce in this state. So there's not a silver bullet. There's not one thing. If you just do this and everybody will be great. It's a combination of all of these things. And if you can get smart about it and plan ahead and actually do some scenario modeling, you're going to be in a lot better shape. And you're going to be ahead of the game compared to the majority of the population.
I love it, Marcus. Well, I am going to just take a moment. Daisy, if you want to talk a little bit, because I've taken over this conversation. So I'll let you talk about where to find us.
Oh, well, same thing. You can find us in LinkedIn and any of the social platforms. Mine is anything you can look at. DW Concepts, pretty much the same. And then the website is lumapath.ai. And that's where you can find us. And obviously every Wednesday at 10 a.m. here, Pacific Standard Time, here on LinkedIn.
We love doing this. And I want to encourage everyone, if you want to be on the show, if you have an opinion, if you want to be a guest, we love to have people that want to be guests on the show. We do this every week. Again, 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern. We'd love to have you. So drop us a note in LinkedIn or in emails or wherever you find us. And we would love to talk to you and get your opinions and keep this conversation going. Marcus, my friend, I so appreciate it. Thank you for being with us. It's been great. And we will do it again. We'll do another conversation. All right. I think you're probably much more valuable than you think you are. I'm
early days.
I'm pretty sure. Thank you, my friend, so much for being here. All right. Take care, everyone. See you next week.